on the call as well. My name's Toby Dewar. I'm a cricket tragic, but my day job is the Director of Engagement at Foxtel Media. So I'm lucky enough to run sessions like these, and I'll intro Gilly in a moment, whereby we're giving you access to our talent, but in doing that, also giving you access to our strategy. And you'll see that come through in the conversation today around the growth through sport and streaming. And what we want to do today is share some anecdotes and stories and views of what's coming up across the summer. But equally, we want to make sure that you've got a few things to run away, whether that's some good stories or whether that's an application of how to use Foxtel across the coming summer as well. So that's what's in store. Before we rip into that, I just want to pause for a moment and acknowledge that where I am today on Pyrmont land, I'm meeting the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. I want to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. And today we meet from Sydney right across the WA. So I also want to acknowledge where you're working this morning and pay my respects as well. So today's session will be mostly a chat with Gilly, and then we'll also have a few of my team talk about some of the key drivers of Foxtel at the moment. We want to make sure we've got the opportunity to hear from Adam and hear many of his stories and his views to unpack summer. As I do that, one thing I just want to call out in the chat function, which has already started, is if you have any questions that you want to ask Adam, just send it through on the chat function and I'll jump in and read them out across the next half hour. I could go for 2 hours. I've only got Adam for about 45 minutes, so I won't do that, but I appreciate there might be others out there who will have a burning question to ask him as well. So please jump in and do that. I'll keep an eye on that and we can kick off. So Adam Gilchrist AM is regarded as one of the greatest wicketkeeper batsmen that's not just played for Australia, but more broadly, that's played cricket. And someone who's played 96 tests, 271 days, numerous T20s. And he's been someone who lives the passion of the game. And we see that, luckily, at Foxtel, as he's part of the Fox cricket team that runs across Fox Sports and KO. And there are days like these where we are on sort of the cusp of the winter codes finishing and cricket starting. And that's why we wanted to get together this afternoon and talk to Adam about what's coming up, what can we expect to see, what games are on, and hopefully within that, there's a few things that we can land with you that you can take away and talk to your clients and certainly talk to the team about. It's Perth and it's pretty early on a Monday morning. It's a public holiday. It was his daughter's 18th. So we are very, very grateful to have Gilly on the call for all those reasons. But Gilly, good to catch up, mate, and welcome.
Thanks, Toby. Yeah, good afternoon to, I gather, where most people are. Great to be chatting with you. And yeah, I'll apologise for a few things, probably how tired I might look due to that said 18th last night. I'll apologise if the dog barks occasionally too in the background, but I think we're all accustomed to that in the last 2 or 3 years, aren't we? About the sort of the link ups like this and the various things that can happen. But and thanks for the intro, Toby. Please don't call me Adam. That's only from my wife or my mum when I'm in trouble. But I do appreciate any introduction. I don't assume everyone knows who I am. It was not that long ago where I was at a sponsors function where it was a meet and greet and handshake, photo, selfie, all that stuff, as is the modern way. And, I went to the airport to fly out after a pretty long sort of day of small talk and, you know, all that light sort of chatter. And I was a bit knackered and I just wanted some time to myself. And then I sensed a bloke looking at me in the bookstore at the airport, and I looked around and he sort of shimmied away and didn't quite have the confidence to come over, but he kept looking at me and I'm thinking, nah, mate, not now. Don't talk to me. This is my time. I've switched off. But he finally came over, tapped me on the shoulder, and I turned around and smiled. He said, "Oh, excuse me, are you Glenn McGrath?" So I don't assume everyone knows who I am. So I appreciate your little intro there, but it's good to be catching up with everyone, and yeah, looking forward to the chat.
Well, it's an absolute pleasure to have you here today, Glenn, and I really appreciate the time. So, actually, is that just on that? Because I love the banter between you two when you were playing was often, you know, always on in the niggle. Did that sit well with you, or did that upset you being referred to as pigeon in that context?
It's amazing how many people did come up and just literally say, "Oh, g'day, Glenn," or, you know, all the time. And my brother's name is Glenn, so half the time I didn't know if they were mistaking for my brother or for Glenn McGrath. But no, it was always all pigeon. All Glenn McGrath used to say is, when I made reference to me being mistaken as him, he said, "Geez, I've always thought you're a really good-looking bloke, Gilly." So, and that's proving me correct. So, yeah, he's a modest man, Glenn, but no, good fun. He was a good teammate, which I was very fortunate to play in not just a very successful era of Australian cricket teams, but just a bunch of really good blokes who, sadly, we've had a tough start to the year where we lost a couple, which was really sad, who were two members of our Fox cricket commentary team as well, in the form of Warney and Andrew Simons. But hopefully, whilst we won't ever replace those two, we'll certainly carry their spirit forward and their memory and their legacy this summer.
Well said, mate. And if I may just ask on that, I mean, it's a season like no other, or an off season like no other. How do you prepare for the season ahead with that in mind, and also with the need to get together again, I imagine, for the first time in a while as a collective? Because quite often you do your own thing in the off season, but when you land in that room in different circumstances, how do you feel about that at the moment, Gilly?
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it, because again, it'll be another opportunity to celebrate two wonderfully good blokes and really close friends, but also allow the public, the greater public, to acknowledge and celebrate and remember these guys as well. And I mean, geez, for those, don't assume everyone's an AFL tragic, but to watch Robbie Williams pre-game, and there he is referring to his great friend Warney. I mean, what a rock star, Warney, just getting that acknowledgement, in a grandstand now that's named after him. So, they're both. I think if you'd said, who's the two most unique teammates that you played with that you could never really replace because of their personality, it would be Warney and Roy. Just so different in their own individual ways. But so with that in mind, as I say, we're not going to look to replace them, but we'll acknowledge them, and I think we should be encouraged to acknowledge them a lot if it's appropriate, without going overboard, but just so that memory can live on in the spirit of the way they went about their cricket and the way they viewed cricket and talked about it. So yeah, to get together collectively as a group will be emotional, but I think we're all really keen to do that and press on in what is going to be an unbelievable about 5 or 6 months of cricket.
Yeah, and I think today we'll unpack that, because there's quite a bit in a season that is anchored with World Cups and sort of effectively ends in the Ashes when you turn into next year. But we won't go down that path yet. Can I ask, Gilly, you mentioned the AFL. So before we get into cricket, what codes do you watch? We're lucky to have such access to sport globally. And is there any code or commentator that you watch that you look to emulate or look to sort of steal some tips from as you've been in the chair for a while now, but like any sports person who's grown up with this sense of constant improvement, who do you watch and who do you try to emulate in your commentary?
I love just watching and listening to as many broadcasters as possible to see the different styles and techniques. And I'm a bit biased, and I'm not just because he's a major part of our team, but I love Mark Howard. He's so diverse in his coverage of sport, his knowledge of sport. Obviously, a big part of our cricket setup, but he does Fox Footy, calls games. He hosts a significant footy show every Saturday night on the Fox Footy channel. So I really enjoy. I've learnt most about broadcasting from Howie, and what I love about him is he literally started at the bottom, just pulling cables on a TV set, setting up at Formula One tracks, for laying down the cables to get all the tech rolled out. And then next minute he was a camera operator's assistant, and next minute he found himself in front of the camera. So he knows it all. He knows the editing side of it. He knows a whole production side of it. So I've really enjoyed trying to learn what I can about the other side of the camera, to hopefully be able to then help what you can present in front of camera. And so, Howie's a big one. Across, again, a bit biased. I love Ricky Ponting, his analysis. I love, Jared Waitley, the way he calls. So I think for all those names I've mentioned, there's probably people on here today going, "Oh, I can't stand them." That's the beauty of it. Everyone's got their opinion. Everyone, you can listen when you want to, you can mute it when you want to, but I enjoy listening and watching all of it just to try and pick little pieces out to hopefully benefit your presentation skills personally, or my presentation skills personally, to keep learning and evolving.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the How He Games podcast, which I know you've been pretty active on, but and not making any comparison, but if you want to hear from someone who knows how to listen and how to ask and how to really be in tune with the conversation, I concur with his ability to empathize and really understand the audience. It's pretty impressive.
A stat for you: the How He Games, I think he's done 180 episodes. Number one. Not number one most downloaded. It's not that. I was the first. So I was actually his crash test dummy. I was the guinea pig. But he does them. I think he does about 2 hours now with his subject, his guest. Yeah. I think mine went for about 35 minutes. So I didn't give him much, obviously, but it's grown a lot.
And a good tip, but both sport and non-sport, it's worth a listen. Yeah. Let's rip into the summary ahead. And again, just a quick mention, if you want to chuck a question in the thread, please do this afternoon. It's a big season ahead, Gilly. So let's start with the T20s, and we can sort of quickly touch on overnight's performance in India. So those who would have seen a closely contested but lost series to India just completed. We're defending the title. So let's talk about the T20 first. When's it start? What's the Aussies' chances within that as well?
Yeah, it starts just in a few weeks. The main, opening fixture is October 22. That's in Sydney, Australia versus New Zealand, which is a repeat of the final that was played a year ago, where Australia won over in the UAE. So there are some preliminary qualifying games prior to that of sort of the smaller nations trying to qualify to get into the main draw. But the main draw kicks off in about 4 weeks' time. So, but there's plenty of action leading into that too with Australia. As you say, Tobes, they finished last night in India. They come back and they've got a couple of T20s against the West Indies and then 3 against England, which will be very exciting, because England are, up there in the top rung of T20 teams, and as equal a favourite as anyone to try and to win it here this summer. So that'll be a terrific sort of form guide and entertaining cricket, to say the least, leading into the actual World Cup event. So Australia's chances, well, no one's defended the trophy in the relatively short history of the T20 World Cup. I think there's been 7 editions of this particular World Cup. So no one's defended it when they've been the holders, and no one's won on home soil. So you'd have to say the odds are stacked against the Aussies. But I tell you, I think we're much more fancied this time around than we were 12 months ago when we went to the UAE and won the title there. So, and I think that comes on the back of local knowledge, local playing conditions on how to play certain grounds, the dimensions of grounds, the pitches that you're playing on. And I think we've got a really well-balanced lineup. We've got attacking weapons all the way through, and one guy, a name that, again, don't assume everyone here is a cricket tragic, but a name that's been thrown around a little bit and surprise selection, Tim David. He showed last night in India for Australia what the excitement's about. And those that watched the Big Bash would have seen it, but he scored, I think, 52 off about 25 or 26 deliveries. So that's the sort of impact that he's having. So, yeah, it's going to be an amazing tournament. India versus Pakistan at the MCG. That sold out in about 10 minutes from when they released the tickets. That'll be rival the crowd that we saw yesterday or 2 days ago for the grand final, upwards of 95 to 100,000. That there's just so many of those little sort of jewels throughout the tournament. Australia, playing New Zealand, as I say, to open up the tournament. It's going to be a terrific tournament. I've no doubt about that. But Australia's a good chance to progress through right to the very end.
And it's a good lead-in, because normally tradition would be the last weekend in November. The first test will be at the Gabba. So you've got what can often be a quieter time for sport when the winter codes finish. We go straight into this tournament, and just staying on the Aussies again for a moment, because they seem to be well placed in terms of the depth. You've got Cam Green now opening, and just like an incredible. Who else do you sort of keep an eye on from the Aussie side, and to put you on the spot, who wins the tournament when it finishes?
Yeah, sure. And before I forget too, I reiterate what you said, Toby. I'm more than happy if there's questions from anyone that's online. I'll let you sort of moderate or look or read and scan through it while we chat, but happy to answer any questions. Cam Green, interestingly, was the surprise package of the T20 setup in this tour to India. He hadn't really featured in Australia's white ball programs up to some games up in Townsville and Cairns about a month ago, and then these games in India. He's not in the World Cup squad, which is he only went to India because David Warner had a break leading into this World Cup and a busy summer. But they threw him up the top of the order, and he was brilliant. He's a cricketer who is just developing and evolving before your very eyes almost every innings. An absolute gentle giant, one of the nicest young men you'll ever meet, but just the confidence he's gaining in his cricket. And I think what he's got from that white ball success will filter into the 5 test matches that Australia are going to play at home this summer. He's already set a base in test cricket. He's there, he's secure, he's got enough confidence to feel like he belongs there. Now he's going to really flourish, I think, from the confidence he's gained from this white ball cricket. So, yeah, but ironically not in the T20 World Cup, because that team was picked about 3 or 4 weeks ago. And I guess if they were picking it today, the one player who might be under pressure is Captain Aaron Finch for his spot at the top of the order. But Finchy, he fired a few shots over in India without going on and getting a huge score. And I think Finchy's captaincy is really crucial. Tactically, he's very sound, and he's a highly respected leader in amongst that player group. So while Finchy retired from one-day cricket, I think he's still got a bit more to give in the T20 format, and I expect that he'll play with a really positive intent and a free mind when he gets to the World Cup here back in Australia. So, I think David Warner will be a standout again. And I think Adam Zampa, for mine, I think Adam Zampa could have been player of the tournament in the last World Cup. David Warner just nudged him there. But I think Zampa will be a pretty big contributor in an Australian tournament on big grounds, bowling spin. He could get a lot of wickets with blokes trying to hit him over the rope. So, look, I think Australia are a definite chance to win it. Are they certainties? No. T20 cricket is too much of a lottery to know. But I think we, at minimum, get to the semi-final, and then it's sort of anyone's guess on any given day. But I do think Australia can definitely got the weapons there to win it.
Brilliant. And I want a quick question. A lot of controversy around should he be captain for the 50 over match or have any leadership role. Quick view on the situation with Warner.
I expect that Cricket Australia will bring down the lifetime ban that was imposed on him about 4 years ago now. I expect that they'll say, we'll take that away now. You're free to be captain of any team that should you be selected to be captain. I don't expect them to name him captain for anything. I may well be wrong, but just he's nearer the end of his career than the start. And there's, Pat Cummins obviously captaining the Test team. They appointed Steve Smith as vice captain there. There's a couple of other guys. Alex Carey comes into the equation in 50 over cricket. So there's a couple of younger guys I think that they may feel are better suited to take on the role now. And David Warner, he's got the knowledge and the fundamentals there that he can still contribute as a leader. He just doesn't need to be necessarily captain. So I would think that they shy away from going to him with any great haste, unless they feel that there's a vote of no confidence in those younger guys. But I think Pat Cummins has been outstanding, and there's a couple of other guys, as I mentioned there, that could do it in white ball cricket.
Yeah, well said. I'm actually going to take this moment. Levi just sent through a question on this theme in terms of what you did as a captain and as a senior player in the group for a long period of time. Just paraphrasing what Levi said here, can you unpack the leadership principles you employed? And further, was it the players or the other stakeholders that were more challenging? So was it the selector group that was more challenging, or the players? So what's your style of leadership, Gilly?
Style of leadership. I mean, I love being vice captain. I never coveted captaincy. I love being vice captain because it's all fun and no responsibility. Like, you can make all the suggestions you want, but if it doesn't work, it was Ricky's fault or Steve Moore's fault. But I did. I mean, it was a tremendous honour to captain Australia in Test cricket or in any format. But when I did captain, say in Test cricket, I was only ever filling in for Steve or for Ricky. So I just tried to continue with the same, and I believed in the philosophies and styles that they had. Just try to keep it sort of sailing in the same direction, nothing too radical, nothing. But my style of leadership is pretty, I guess, reasonably collegiate, pretty open, and sort of garnering ideas from those around, trying to, I guess, to an extent, empower those in your group to feel like they've got that engagement and ownership of what we're trying to achieve as a group. One of the hardest leadership roles I had was in the Indian Premier League with the IPL, which is, you're trying to bring together. It's as close to what I would imagine being CEO of an organisation, and I don't think I'll ever be CEO of any organisation. But you've got an owner, basically a billionaire in India, sort of up here, and you're almost like the chairperson, and you report to them, and then you're there, and then you've got, sort of a level of executive management, if you like, of coach, and then you've got assistant coaches and then the medical staff that you're trying to coordinate and help bind together, and then you've got the player group, which is probably like the staff body, and in that staff body you got 6 different nationalities. Wow. You got 6 different languages, and Indian players that don't even speak the same language because they come from such extreme different parts of India. You're working with the marketing team, and you're trying to win games of cricket on the field. So you're trying to bring a lot together. It was brilliant fun, but that was a challenging role, but quite fulfilling when it all comes together. So, as I say, pretty open, love to collect the ideas, but you got to be prepared to make a decision. The buck's got to stop somewhere. So that's probably my style of leadership.
Great answer. Good question, Levi. And there's another question from David, which is on the theme of, I'm going to go from the IPL to the Big Bash. A lot of talk about that being a tied format, Gilly, and a lot of pressure on that format, be it from a broadcast perspective, but from the talent itself. Thoughts on the Big Bash? How's that going to be different and better this season?
Yeah, sorry, and I forgot, I didn't, to Levi's question asked about dealing with players or stakeholders, I think, and I interpreted that, and I might be wrong, Levi, but stakeholders being, as a captain, taking on the role of all the off-field stuff, and be it dealing with press, dealing with sponsors, and all that, so, and management from head office, so to speak. I actually enjoyed that aspect of it. Even if I wasn't captain of the Australian team, you still had a fair bit of exposure to that as a player and a senior player in the Australian setup. I think I always just tried to embrace that and look at it as opportunity. And you never knew where one conversation may lead at a function, at a sponsor's function or an event. And I think that eyes wide open mentality helped direct me post-career into the various things that I've managed to taste and try. and now inevitably back into media and broadcasting. So and other guys don't want anything to do with the other stakeholders. They just want to catch cricket balls, hit cricket balls, bowl them, and that's fine. But so sorry, to the Big Bash.
Please, yeah.
I reckon the Big Bash is really going to sort of back on that upward trajectory. I think it's a season of revitalising the Big Bash. It shot out of the blocks a few years ago, just this upward sort of growth curve in all the numbers, be it spectators going to the game, TV viewership, interest in the game, new people coming to the game, new audiences, new demographics. So I guess it was inevitable it was going to plateau a bit. Yeah. And then I think even Cricket Australia would admit that it's dipped lower than what they would have hoped because of a whole lot of contributing factors, but we don't need to back up over all that. And COVID had a huge impact too, particularly last summer. It was decimated by COVID, that competition. And in hindsight, perhaps a pause might have been more worthwhile rather than trying to manufacture a competition in such adversity. But I think already we've had a draft, the BBL draft, a live event that we ran on Fox. I thought Fox and the production team did a terrific job in conjunction with Cricket Australia to make that interesting and entertaining, but also informative. And if anything, whilst there's a number of areas that will be easily improved next year when they do a draft, I think if anything, it showed just how well prepared the franchises are and how professional they are in the way they judge talent and recruit and plan for a season. So it probably legitimised the format and the competition even more as a serious cricket competition. And for me personally, I think that's where the Big Bash has just been a bit in between. Is it just entertainment? Is it the fireworks, the music, the colour, or is it a legitimate format of the game that's a serious competition? And I think to be respected and acknowledged and watched, it needs to be the highest possible cricket that they can get. And to get that, they need as much Australian homegrown talent playing as possible. And that's what you're going to see more of this summer, a lot more of, which is fantastic to have David Warner and Pat Cummins, hopefully, but, and Steve Smith, hopefully, but all the other players. A few of the bowlers won't play because they will just need a little break before they head off on a big overseas test match trip. But all those batters getting in there, I think that's going to lift the standard again and make it really compelling to see them go head to head.
And let's change gears and just check in on this because there's a couple of questions come through. We've got about 15 minutes left, but I just want to quickly and importantly touch on the women's game, Gilly, the Com Games recently, and the growth of that and the success of that team, and more broadly the growth of women's sport. Reflections on that and how good does that sit globally as a sport at the moment?
Yeah, well, the WBBL, that's best in class around the world. That is the premier women's T20 competition and gets all the top talent from around the world. And even the Indian Cricket Board released their players to come and play, which is proven to be a bit of a handbrake in the men's competition, that the Indian men aren't allowed to go and play in any, not just in Australia, but any other T20 competition around the world. So the women's Big Bash League that's absolute top tier. Put it in that bracket as well. The women's national team, they are, I think, the most successful sporting team, Australian sporting team across all sports. Certainly in the last 10 to 15 years, they just dominate everywhere they play. So, and not only that, I think they play in a way that is just so engaging. They're just such a wonderful bunch of friends, just playing cricket together, having fun, in great spirit, and they just win graciously. They lose graciously. They just look like they're just out there playing for all the reasons that anyone that's played sport starts out from, and that's just enjoying it. But they're fiercely competitive and professional again. the opportunity for them to become full-time professionals has just seen that the sport absolutely grow, and the standard and the entertainment value in it just go from strength to strength. And it's a bit like, I think, around the women's AFL, the AFLW, it's still so young in its formative years, but as the professionalism comes into it, in the next 5 years and in 10 years' time, the standard is just going to go off the chart. And that's what happened to women's cricket about 5 or 10 years ago. So that the women's side just brilliantly led and highly respected. And I think that's going to be another feature throughout the summer as far as the coverage goes. Every single game, every ball, all the usual stuff. Ad break free during play, but part of the culmination of the summertime here as the broadcast will be, as you said earlier, Toby, the bookend of the men's T20 World Cup, and then the women's at the back end of the summer.
Yeah, it's massive. Now, in between that, I've got two more questions for you, Gilly. One quick one, if I may, on the Test series. So we've got the Windies coming out, but also South Africa. That's a team that has so much history, which we've sort of touched on indirectly with Sandpaper Gate. But your quick thoughts on the South African Test series, and then I've got one more to ask you before we change gears.
Yeah. So 2 tests. So after the World Cup, the men's T20 World Cup, that culminates November 13th, I think, is the final in CG. Yep. And then about 2 weeks after that, 2 tests against the West Indies. And then which it'll be hard to know what the West Indies produce. They're not a consistently well-performed Test team in the recent sort of generation, but they're dangerous enough if they get it right. So I would expect Australia to pretty well dominate against the West Indies. But the South African series, so that's the 3 tests. I think it's the Gabba late or mid-December, and then you head into Boxing Day in Sydney, New Year. They could be a tougher proposition, and they've just played a Test series in England, which England ended up winning 2-1 in 3 tests. But they are an aggressive team. They're aggressive bowling lineup, and that history, you say, they haven't played Australia since the whole Sandpaper Gate 4 years ago in Test cricket. So a lot of what happened around that whole Sandpaper Gate and that desperation from the Australians to go to those lengths, which obviously no one's really proud of, was invoked because of the aggressiveness between these two teams. The way they were going at each other, and the way that South Africa were challenging Australia. So I expect it's going to be a lot more closely fought than anyone's really understanding of, and there's a few old scores to settle there. So it's going to be pretty compelling viewing in the prime time of the summer. So can't wait for that. And as part of our coverage, we'll have Sean Pollock, who was a former captain, terrific guy, wonderful broadcaster. It's going to be great to have him as part of our commentary team in amongst a whole lot of other usual faces.
Brilliant. Final question, and it's come through the thread, Gilly. So I want to ask this in the context of what you've gone through, but I think it's well worded from Haroon. So on a more personal note, with the loss of your good friends, Shane Warne and Andrew Simons, how has this changed your approach to both life and your everyday work in the commentary box, if we may ask that question?
Yeah, sure. It's funny. It's meant that a whole lot of us, of our mates that we played with, keeping in touch a bit better. In fact, we even had a bit of a mini reunion in Melbourne a few weeks ago, which was good. It was nice to be catching up just for fun reasons rather than at funerals, because we had Rod Marsh as well. So we had 3 in about 6 weeks. But without getting too cliche about it, I must admit in the 6 months or so now since Warnie and Rod's passing, and then a few weeks later, Roy, I do think of them a lot more. I think of them most days, actually. I've always seemed to have something lying around that reminds me of them. But just that, don't sweat the small stuff. Don't get too stressed out about it. If there's something, or if you're running late or whatever, or you're not sure on a couple of things, don't panic it. I really have found there's a lot of these moments in life where you have it and you say, oh, well, we'll take a different perspective on life. And then all of a sudden you're back in the same flow. But the loss of these guys was pretty deep and just stunning, if you like. Just felt stunned by it. You couldn't believe it all happened so quick. But so trying to use that just to sit back and take a big, deep breath and realize that, it's probably not as bad as what you think it is, whatever the scenario is.
Yeah, well, again, thank you for that questions and the questions throughout the thread and respect, and I appreciate it. It's a good thing for us all to reflect on, Gilly. So I appreciate that very honest answer and everything you've gone through now.
And sorry, there was how's it affecting my commentary? Well, I don't think this is being disrespectful. We've all had a chuckle, our commentary team in our little chat groups, or when we caught up for the launch last week. We'll all have a little bit more space, a bit more airtime to talk without Warnie there, because when he got onto a roll, he could talk.
He couldn't get in.
We'd all sit there and go, okay, you take it for a spin, Warnie. But no, I don't think anyone's being rude there. It'll be interesting, although there might be just a lot of silence as well.
Well said, and what a privilege to hear that insight and what you've been through and what you're looking to for ahead as well. So guys, just a quick couple of footnotes to today's conversation, and Gilly, just I'll put you sort of on pause for a moment. Caitlin, I'm going to bring you into the conversation, who's our head of digital sports and sales and sponsorships. Now, we've gone through a lot of growth around cricket, Caitlin, which has been well told, and what's ahead is significant. I'm going to ask you just a quick question about what's next for KO. Where's the growth coming from? And can you answer point B, how do the teams get involved in KO moving forward as well?
So obviously we've got a massive, I suppose, half year of cricket that Gilly's just touched on. So plenty coming up, and kind of the growth and what's going to kind of drive that going forward is very much the World Cup. So it's kind of going to pique the interest going from the footy seasons into the traditional summer of cricket. So where we generally have a gap, that's really going to bridge that for us from a subscriber perspective. We probably won't see that drop off. And then being kind of the current reigning world champions, throw in a Rugby League World Cup as well. It's doing sort of really strong stuff for us. On that as well, obviously coming off the back of a record-breaking winter code season, be a bit remiss of us not to kind of touch on that, particularly the last weekend's results. But across the board, we're in growth. So AFL, NRL, and particularly to kind of point out the linear TV delivery this year. Whilst kind of across the board that's been down, we've been sort of up 5% across AFL and holding relatively flat on NRL. So really pleasing there. KO up 44%, Go now up 13%, and then obviously venues delivering really strong. So going back to the record-breaking week, we're nearly at 1 mil. So 985, but we're salespeople, so we'll say 1 mil. But that kind of growth is really it's pivotal for us to take us from the winter codes kind of into the traditional summer of cricket. And then to your sort of first point, how advertisers can get around it. We've got essentially one stream that sits across 4 platforms. So we've got the ability to deliver multiple different advertising messages all at once. So we've got the linear, your state-based messaging across your streaming, and then obviously the out-of-home product with venues. So being able to capture those people kind of in the out-of-home experience.
Got it completely covered. Thank you. Now, Georgia, just a quick one to you too. Talking more broadly across digital, because we sold this session this afternoon on growth through digital across Foxtel. What's driving that growth? And again, similar question, what's next for the agencies on the call today?
I definitely would attribute our general entertainment growth to the quality of our content. An example being the release of House of the Dragon recently, which quickly became the #1 new series to premiere on Foxtel in Foxtel's history, which is massive. And then the likes of Mayor of Easttown and all of the attention that series got and its nominations for awards just speaks to kind of the premium nature of our content. And then just the vast volume of general entertainment content that we have. Just one example would be Tubi in itself has 16,000 TV series and movies available. So in regards to getting involved, I would definitely say my personal belief is the more touch points that a campaign has, the more beneficial that campaign will be. So just ensuring that you're maximizing your campaigns across sport and GE as well to deliver incremental reach for your clients.
Brilliant. So guys, that's it. Thank you, Georgia and Caitlin, who did a lot of work, and we've actually got some flyers we'll send through. Today wasn't about doing a long sell on the business, but rest assured, we're here for that conversation, and quite genuinely, we've seen the growth over the last 6 months. It is all through streaming, and the likes of KO in particular is leading that charge. So we'll send out some information on that because we want to make sure that you can grab not just the access to Gilly, but also the access to the audiences that we have on our platform. So Georgia and Caitlin, thank you for jumping in at the end and just giving a bit of a quick update on the numbers, and we'll follow that up in the other conversations. Gilly, we've got a couple of minutes. Closing comments. What are you most looking forward to this summer, and why?
Was that to me, Tobe? Sorry.
Yes, please.
Yeah, look, I think, obviously the World Cup is going to be a huge event. I think that's going to be such a high profile event. But I mentioned that the South African Test Series. I can't wait to see. There's a guy, Kagiso Rabada, who opens the bowling for South Africa. I can't wait to see him steaming in, maybe on Boxing Day, bowling to David Warner. Who I think there's some niggle between those two. So that is going to be box office stuff. And also the two big bashes, the men's and the women's. I think, just as I say, from a men's perspective, to see that revitalised and it's been given a bit of a shake-up, that'll be terrific to see how that goes. And as I say, that the sort of world-leading women's T20 competition in the WBBL, to see that just being played out again and watching those superstars run around. So, yeah, it's just so many formats, so much content, as we've just heard, and great that it's, you can see it all in one place.
Well said, mate. Thank you, Gilly, for your time today. It's been brilliant getting the insights and hearing some personal reflections, but also stepping us through the summer ahead. As you say, there's a lot there. So that's all there to sit back and watch and be a part of. So, Beck, I might pass back to you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Thank you for the support across everyone at the IMAA, not just today, but more broadly across the year. And it's been a great opportunity to spend time with the team today. So back to you. Thanks, Beck.